Hi, I'm Dan Demers. I'm the Senior Vice President here at TBR for Sales and Marketing, and visiting with my good friend and winsome travel companion, Patrick Heffernan, Principal Analyst and Practice Director for our Professional Services team. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the key takeaways, some of the questions and conversations we've had as we've had the privilege of traveling and meeting with folks in London and had visitors on site here, leadership from alliances and ecosystems. And today we're going to talk about ecosystems, the trends, what we've seen, and where we're going. So Patrick, I thought it would be a good time to debrief a lot of the travel and meetings that we've been having. I've had the unique pleasure of traveling a lot with you and meeting with different folks, both at the chip level, at the global systems integrator level, IT infrastructure. There's a lot of folks we've been meeting with over the last 2 months.
Yeah.
Seems to be a lot of questions about next year, and almost all the questions keep coming back to the same word: ecosystem.
Yep.
So can you just talk a little bit about some of the trends in the ecosystem that you've seen, where it's been, where it is today, and where you think it's going?
Yeah, and I'll start with a story that came out of our London trip, because I think it sort of explains how much the ecosystem has changed just in the last couple of years coming out of the pandemic. So we were at a chip manufacturer, and they were asking us a lot of questions about the global systems integrators and the consultancies. And I was a bit surprised by the depth and the detail that they were after in trying to understand them, because I didn't think that this chip manufacturer really had any particular relationship or was significantly doing business with the GSIs in the way that they were asking these questions. The next day, we're at one of the India-centric GSIs, and they start walking through their most important alliances, and this chip manufacturer's name comes up. And that's when it was sort of not the light bulb went off, because it sounds like I'm an idiot if I didn't know this before, but basically when I really started to better appreciate that what we've seen in the way that the ecosystem has changed, where it's no longer one partner to one partner, but really multiple partners bringing a full suite of solutions to a client, how that has expanded even beyond just cloud and software and consulting and SI work, really into the devices, the hardware, the chip manufacturers, and how they now appreciate that being in a relationship that is more than just a single partner to partner, but being in a broader alliance really allows everyone to bring that business solution to the client to be able to accelerate revenues across the entire ecosystem. And so that was that is a real change. We're not talking about formal business alliances necessarily so much as closer, I want to say like marriages. Just the companies are doing more together, and that comes through within the ecosystem, and it comes through in the way that we're seeing partnerships that stretch across, again, a consultancy, an SI, a software vendor, a cloud vendor, all the way down to the devices side. And it's a big change.
And when one of my first trips with TBR, you and I and a lot of your team traveled to Texas and had same kinds of conversations with across the spectrum customers of ours. And then we were talking a lot about vendor agnosticism, and a lot of the leading GSIs or the folks who would be a general contractor in these large enterprise digital transformation engagements were doing their best to present to the market that they had no favorites. Fast forward to today, where some of the research that your team and our cloud team and our software team are producing, where we're getting into some very granular headcount, revenue, training trends within the GSIs, within the hyperscalers, within the leading ISVs, the software solutions. Talk a little bit about what we're seeing from a agnosticism versus reality, and then how do we connect that down to, we had a large OEM on site here last week, and they're using this to make radical changes to their go-to-market strategy. Talk to us a little bit about the evolution and what we see today in the marketplace from a data standpoint.
Vendor agnosticism is dead in all but name, and good riddance. It never really made a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, the client actually wants to know that when you show up and when you're delivering on a solution, when you're delivering on a technology, when you're helping them solve a business problem, you're actually bringing the expertise, the deep expertise and the knowledge and the experience. You're not just another guy who understands how to implement Azure or how to implement SAP. So we've seen increasingly that this idea that the SIs and the software vendors and the cloud vendors and even the hardware vendors are all looking to each other to be no longer agnostic, but coming to the client with a preferred partnership, and a preferred partnership meaning that the sales are aligned, the go-to-market's aligned, the who's in the room is already set up, they've already worked that out ahead of time, and most importantly, the people are actually experts and experienced across the entire technology stack from the SI all the way, again, to the device manufacturer. So that has really killed vendor agnosticism. It's still out there. People still use that phrase. Clients still sometimes use that phrase until you actually talk to them what they're doing. They're saying, yeah, we do prefer that the SI comes in and says we have a dedicated practice of a Microsoft Azure stack that is dedicated within our consultancy, and we're going just after those capabilities. So that's one part of it. Another part of it is, I think, what has helped kill vendor agnosticism is end-to-end is also dead. No vendor out there that is being realistic talks about being end-to-end, because there's not a single vendor that can do everything that the client needs across their business problem, their digital transformation, their move to the cloud, their move back from the cloud, whatever it might be. Nobody can do all of it. And so getting rid of this idea of, we're end-to-end, instead it's we're partnering better, smarter, more efficiently. We're bringing to the table everything you need, but we're part of the solution. We're not the end-to-end provider of a solution. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think when, for example, if we were to look at the cloud ecosystem research that your members of your team and members of our cloud team came together to produce, you really can see it's a stark difference between the hyperscalers and their GSI partners. Who has how much revenue of their cloud business, how much of it, how many eggs are in the AWS basket, how many eggs are in the GCP basket or the Azure basket. It really is stark, and you really do start to see there are Azure houses, there are AWS houses and GCP houses, and they're different.
Yeah.
So a lot of that isn't presented into the marketplace. They still are perpetrating the story of vendor agnosticism. And I wonder, as we go down the stack, looking at Salesforce, looking at Adobe, looking at SAP soon, and other leading solution providers, are we going to see the same reality of a certain, eggs in some baskets and not in others?
Yeah, 100%. I think these trends are only going to accelerate, and we're going to start to see where different ways that the vendors align themselves by geo, by a particular industry, by a particular set of capabilities is going to become even more pronounced. So rather than looking to a vendor and saying, well, we can pick any one of the perfect example, the big four. The big four all seem like the same. So Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, and EY. On the surface, all the same business model. On the surface, they're all companies that all came out of the big eight or whatever it used to be. Once you start to unpeel just a little bit, you can see how stark the differences are between those big four firms. Increasingly, the hyperscalers, SAP, Oracle, Workday, ServiceNow, they are all appreciating much better how different those big four firms are. And they're aligning themselves and saying, well, how do our strategic bets line up best with EY, as opposed to how do they line up with PwC? Where should we be going? So those alliances are going to become deeper, tighter, more efficient, which is importantly for everybody, not just for the vendors themselves, but for the clients as well. And I think that's absolutely where we're heading. And just to take a step back, and from our perspective at TBR, we looked at, for 10 years, I've looked at the SIs and the consultancies and thought about everything they do as sort of being, in my own world, kind of end to end. It was when we launched that cloud ecosystem market landscape, when we launched the research that brought together the cloud and the software part of TBR together with our research and professional services, that we finally began to see that we needed to stretch out of what we were thinking of end to end, and we needed to recognize how broad that ecosystem was. And so by bringing the headcount and the revenue and the trained resources and the strategy and the go-to-market to bring all that together from the cloud side and the services side meant we were understanding the picture much, much better than we had been previously. And now, and in some ways, it's our clients coming to us and saying, help us better understand how are these partners playing together, where are they making their investments, where are they going. either so that they can partner with them if they're outside of that space, or so that they can partner more smartly with the companies they're already partnered with.
And when we talk to when you talk to customers and we have these meetings, so often we're faced with a person whose primary responsibility, they're working with AWS, or they're at AWS and they're working with Accenture. We often hear the question, or I guess it would be an objection. What can you tell me that I don't already know? I talk to 16 people at my GSI partner every day. I go golfing with them. We're taking vacations together. They're my colleague. You can't tell me anything I don't already know. Mm-hmm. When the reality is there's so much more to the competitive landscape of the ecosystem that person may never see. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about some of the conversations you've had and some of the ways that we help not just the person who's managing that one-to-one relationship, but their leaders or even their enablement staff underneath them?
Yeah, and I'm glad you put it that way, because that's exactly where we can help. Because the person that says, I manage the relationship with AWS, there's nothing you tell me about AWS I don't already know. Okay.
Fair.
But you're going to get questions from your boss, and you're going to try to enable your sales team or whoever it is that you're working with. And in order to help them understand that landscape better, you're going to need our help, because what we're going to be able to tell you is, how is AWS partnering with others in ways that they're not partnering with you? Because AWS is not going to tell you how they're partnering with others in ways that they're not partnering with you. That's number one. Number two, we're going to tell you, how important are you really to AWS? I mean, you're seeing the revenue that you're bringing in. You're seeing the size of your business. But in the grand scheme of AWS, how big is that? How significant is it? Is it growing faster than someone else's business is growing with AWS? So that's the looking up and answering that question from higher up. The question that the answers you're trying to bring to the rest of the sales team or everybody else who you're trying to enable is all about what does AWS actually do that's different. So while you may know AWS, can you actually articulate to a salesperson, this is why we're partnering with AWS. This is what AWS actually does. It's different. So we helped out one of our clients to do exactly that, where they were trying to understand how does, in this case it was AWS and Azure and Google Cloud Platform, how do they view us? And when they are out with clients, how do they describe what we do? And there was a huge gap there, because AWS and Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Platform didn't have people that could articulate precisely what was different about this client. And they didn't realize that. They didn't realize that the salespeople, the engineers, the cloud architects, and all that kind of stuff at that level who were engaging with their clients could not articulate to their clients what was different about our client that we were working with, a consultancy. And so if you think you know AWS because you're the one that owns that relationship, you still need to be able to understand what we bring in terms of the context of AWS and what they're doing at a broader level with their other partners. And you still have to be able to find that way of getting your message through the sales, the local, the boots on the ground level at AWS to actually make sure that they're selling you, you're not just telling them, the same old thing. And they're not saying the same old thing about you again and again. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So it sounds like there's a lot of complexity. And the more that there's this story, as I said earlier, perpetrating this idea of vendor agnosticism, the more complex it has to appear to the IT decision maker at enterprise, at medium business. So prognosticate for me. What's the magic ball? What's the crystal ball? What's the future look like? Are we going to see, I think I heard one of your staff say, supergroup? Is there going to be declared partnerships and overt commanding of what is that going to look like?
Yeah, and I hate to do this because we've made it however long we have without saying the words GenAI, but I think actually that's going to have a huge impact on creating these supergroups, because in its own way, two things that GenAI brings are speed and transparency. And so there's going to be pricing pressure for everybody, because again, the clients are going to expect to get to a return on investment much faster. They're also GenAI is going to destroy the procurement office. So that's going to lead an opportunity for a lot of clients to look at their IT services vendors, their cloud vendors, their software vendors, and their infrastructure vendors very differently because of all the data, all the acceleration that's going to come through generative AI. That's going to open the opportunity for these super groups to form. And while in the past there may have been a reluctance to go all in on any one vendor, and certainly a reluctance to move away from that best of suite or best in class, when you're able to tie together, I'm just giving an example, but when you're able to tie together EY, IBM, Microsoft, SAP, pick anybody else, Dell, throw them all into the mix and say, this is the super group that we've created. And by the way, when you harness us as a super group and you see what we can do from your data all the way through your processes and your business outcomes, it's going to be enormously difficult to compete with that on a individual ad hoc, let's just come in here. Now, what's going to what will delay that transition will be entrenched relationships, enormously hard to break through. And then a huge, the enabler of entrenched relationships is how much effort goes into client retention. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing this has become a hot topic, just like it was 10 years ago, just like it was 5 years ago. It's coming up again and again. Retaining clients is one of the vendors that we cover is one of their highest strategic priorities right now. And that's because of everything that we've been talking about. All the churn in the ecosystem, all the opportunity for other players to come in and create these super groups is leading everyone to look around and saying, well, how do I hold on to my clients? How do I make sure that I've kept my clients and then grow within those clients? So it's going to be a mess. But I think GenAI, of all things, is actually going to help all of us understand better what's happening in the ecosystem. There's going to be faster time to business solutions and a lot more transparency around pricing and outcomes.
So maybe to put a concluding bow on this, that's where we're headed. Where's TBR headed to serve those needs and to answer those questions? What's next for your team? What's next for the whole TBR team? What kinds of analysis data outputs do we anticipate seeing from TBR?
Yeah, we're gonna go deeper on the relationships that we already look at. So we already have, how do the leading systems integrators, how do they pair up with the hyperscalers? And we've gone into Salesforce and Adobe as well. We're going to SAP and Oracle in the spring. And I say that we've already got people at TBR that fully understand SAP and Oracle. They're not new to us. What we're going to do is we're going to go deeper on the relationship. So what does Accenture and SAP's relationship look like as a granular level as we can get to make it meaningful and bring that to our clients? And then we're going to expand that beyond just the services practice and the software practice. We need to look at where do the hardware vendors, the Dell, HP, Lenovo, how do they fit into this? Where do the other infrastructure players, where do the other software players fit in? So we're going to continually build out that ecosystem. And I'm doing this because I'm imagining it as a matrix. And all of the companies that I know and love are down this side. And then we're going to talk about all their different partners across the board. So eventually we're going to fill in that entire matrix so that if you come to us and say, what can you tell us about the relationship between EY and Snowflake? We're going to have that. We're going to be able to say, this is what it looks like. These are the investments they've made. These are the people that have been critical in making sure that this relationship has been built up the way it has. The senior people that they've hired, whatever it might be. These are the markets that they play in, and this is where we think it's going.
So we're going to follow the money.
Yeah, well, we always do. So,
well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. So
awesome.
Thanks for taking the time. Look forward to our next trip together.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
That's exactly my question. Where are we going next?
Oh, good question. We're headed into the winter season here in New England. So perhaps someplace warm, maybe Austin. Austin's always a nice place to go when it gets a little chilly up here. I don't know if there are other places that you'd like to visit.
Yeah, we don't think alike. I was thinking Chicago and Toronto. I'm ready to go colder, not warmer.
Well, we could always, there's friends to visit and folks who are asking questions in Chicago, Toronto, Seattle, Redmond.
Let's go.
Round Rock, you name it.
Let's go.
San Jose. There's a lot of folks, so we'll look to see you on the road sometime soon.
Excellent. Thanks,
All right.
Dan.
Thanks.